Hey ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Toppyou here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. We're actually going to react to what does vaping do to the body, guys. So if you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel, hit a like on this video, guys.
What does vaping do to the body? And how does it compare to regular old cigarette smoking? It's really important to understand the pathways in which those substances will travel. We can bring air in through the nose, and if it goes in through the nose, it'll enter a passageway called the nasal cavity. We can obviously bring in air also through the mouth and the oral cavity. But as the vapor or the air moves down through the pharynx, we're going to move the air or the vapor into the trachea, which is the anterior tube or portion. Here's the trachea. The air is moving down through there. It could go left to the left lung or right to the right lung. And when it branches here, we call these the bronchi. They just further branch into the lung tissue as different types of bronchi. As the bronchi continue to branch, they get smaller, and we change the name to bronchioles. And then
That's actually pretty interesting. Okay, so that'll say breathing part and separate up in the lungs. Okay.
they go into these things called alveolar sacs made up of individual alveoli. The alveoli and the bronchioles tend to be the most affected when we're talking about vaping. But is bringing in that vapor to the human body a bad thing? It definitely can be. You see, over the past few years, hospitals have seen an increase in patients with acute lung injury due to vaping. They've now termed this e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury, or EVALI. These patients were coming in with symptoms very similar to pneumonia, but what they found is there was no infective cause to their symptoms, meaning when they would do testing, they couldn't find a viral cause or a bacterial cause to their symptoms, but found that they all had these similarities and they had recently been vaping. So the idea was that something in that cartridge, or that was being vaporized, was causing some harm to the lungs.
So in simple form, everything have a good and bad to it, because vaping was actually supposed to be the solution for people who has actually smoke cigarettes and stuff like that. Vaping was supposed to actually counteract that and give a person the opportunity to not blacken up your lungs, but at the same time have a safer and enjoyable smoking, you could say, while vaping.
Many of the patients would have fever, chills, and even that generalized icky feeling. Also cough, shortness of breath, and chest pain, and even hemoptysis in some cases. Hemoptysis just being a fancy pants name for coughing up blood. And it makes sense if we're breathing something in that we could affect the lung tissue and have symptoms that would be symptomatic of a lung issue. However, up to 80% of patients with EVALI would have GI symptoms, meaning affecting the GI tract, and they would have things like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and just generalized abdominal pain. So the cause. What do they think is inside these cartridges, and therefore the liquid and the vapor, that could be linked or causing EVALI, and therefore the symptoms in these patients? Well, the challenge is this isn't a highly regulated industry. So the ingredients that one manufacturer might use compared to another manufacturer might not be the exact same. However, they have found a lot of common ingredients in these substances, some of which include things like nicotine, which we know can cause substance dependence or be addictive.
Yeah, then that is the next thing about vaping, right? Because cigarettes have nicotine, and that is what does actually have you hook on smoking. Then vaping supposed to be the solution to stop smoking, and that have nicotine as well, which kind of defeating the purpose, because most people who does vape, it actually, I know, is that actually have different levels of nicotine that they could buy. So it have start off, I think, like 5%, and I think it does range up to like 30, 40, 50, depending which on the cartridges it does actually buy and stuff like that. So it have pretty strong, real strong ones that could give you a good head, like if you're on the good screen stuff, right?
Also containing things like propylene glycol or glycerol. Those are known as humectants, which help moisturize the ingredients within the liquid in the cartridge. We also see things like tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC, even CBD oils, and also they found vitamin E acetate. They can also include over 7,000 flavors, and some have found little traces of metal like tin, nickel, chromium, manganese, and even arsenic. But out of all those ingredients, are some of them more problematic than others? Did they find any specific links to certain ingredients? And the answer is yes. So let's go back to that hospital example. When clinicians were going in and seeing these patients, they'd often observe tachycardia, tachypnea, which is a rapid heart rate, rapid breathing, low oxygen saturation. They'd often get a chest x-ray or CT scan, which would show infiltrates in their lung, or what they refer to as opacities. And the clinicians are thinking, this looks like pneumonia. And then they would go do cultures and see no bacterial cause. Or they do viral panels and couldn't see a viral cause. And that caused them to think, what's going on here? And so in some cases, they would do this procedure called a bronchoalveolar lavage. A bronchoalveolar lavage is pretty cool. It's when you take a scope or a fiber optic camera down into the respiratory passageways, going down into the trachea, and again, it would go down into these further airways, and you'd take the tubing or the camera within the tubing of the lung tissue or the bronchial tree to see if you could view things. Now, what they would also do is literally inject saline, which is kind of a salt water mixture, into those terminal airways, bronchoalveolar lavage, so into the bronchioles and the alveoli, and then they literally suck it up. And then they would take that fluid and analyze it to see what they'd find. Again, they didn't find pathogens, but the majority of people with EVALI, they found vitamin E, acetate, and THC. So what do we do with this information about vitamin E acetate and THC? And since when is vitamin E a harmful substance? Well, it's typically not when we use it in lotions and creams and apply it to our skin or even ingest it. But remember, when we ingest and it goes down the food tube or the esophagus, that's going to be processed a lot differently than if it goes down the airway or into the trachea and down into the respiratory passageways and into the lung tissue. The idea is, could it be that this is this oily kind of thickening substance that coats the lining of the tubing or into the lung tissue that causes an inflammatory response? Is it interacting with the cells in another way that's causing a problem? Well, we don't know the exact mechanism yet, so more research is needed on that. However, because of the strong link of vitamin E acetate to patients with EVALI, the CDC has recommended that vaping companies don't use vitamin E acetate in their products, or you just don't pick a product that has vitamin E acetate. They're also recommending, unfortunately for those that like this stuff, that people don't use products that contain THC, again because of that link of how many people had it found in their bronchoalveolar lavage and had EVALI. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. What does vaping do to the body?
Alright guys, hope you guys actually gained some kind of knowledge from that. That's actually a pretty in-depth video from the Institute of Human Autonomy, right? So that's actually a pretty interesting video because, as you guys know, there's not a lot of knowledge on vaping when it comes down to vaping. Not like cigarette stuff, cigarettes for years out. So vaping is a whole different thing by itself, guys. Well, it's your boy Toppyou, guys. Hope you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and I'm out.